there's our confirmation. Good afternoon to everybody. I'm Althea, and I'm happy to be with you all. And we'd like to hear who is with us for this webinar today. So if you wouldn't mind, we have you off mute, and if you could state your name, what organization you're with, and where you're located in the country, since we have folks joining us from all over. And I will start with Caitlin, please, if you'd introduce yourself. And I'm not sure if Caitlin's phone is operating there. Okay, Elizabeth, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Would you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name's Elizabeth. I'm with the California Community Foundation in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm. And Elizabeth, are you a grantee or are you one of the coordinators putting together
we are a part of
information?
the collaborative.
Very good. Excellent. Thank you. Insa, could you introduce yourself?
Hello?
Hello?
Hi, my name is Elisa Hernandez. I am from Raíces. We're in San Antonio, Texas.
Great. Thank you, Elisa. Karen.
Yes, I'm Karen Kelly. I'm with St. Mary's Law School, also in San Antonio, Texas.
Excellent. Megan?
I'm just going to make copies of this.
Hi, I'm hearing some background noise. If you're not speaking, would you mind muting yourself? And Megan, are you there?
How do you mute?
Okay. Not getting Megan. Krisa, are you there?
Hi there, Krisa from GSER.
Great, thank you. And then who else do we have on the line, since I'm not seeing other names? Who else has not introduced themselves yet?
This is Caitlin Bainey with the Equal Justice Center in Austin, Texas. I just joined the call.
Great. Thank you, Caitlin.
Hi, this is Luis Arango with Catholic Charities of Dallas.
Hi, Luis. Thanks for being with us. Anyone else that we're missing? Okay. Wanted to make sure to thank you all for participating today. And again, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the chat. We're going to go ahead and mute everybody so we can move on with the webinar. And we are excited to talk about this reporting. You know, sometimes data evaluation is not the most exciting thing to discuss, but you all are doing such great work on the ground, and we want to make sure to capture all that information in a way that measures your impact, and we can share it with national funders across the country. Caleb, if you'll move to the next slide. And so for all of you on the call, you may or may not know you are part of Delivering on the Dream Collaboratives. It is a national cohort of funder collaboratives, groups of funders who come together, and they have been focusing on a few things: on increasing the number of immigrants applying for DACA, and hopefully at some point in the future DAPA, building on the legal infrastructure, the outreach and field capacity of our immigration-related service providers across the country, and expanding education and advocacy about DACA. So how it works is you all as grantees, except for our one funder who's on the call, you all are doing your work on the ground as part of this collaborative of funding in your local site, and then we have a group of collaboratives across the country who are operating together, trying to cover as much of the country and as many of our immigrant-serving communities as possible with building this capacity for doing DACA work. And so I want to give you a picture of this on the next slide so you see where all these collaboratives are located. We have 10 funding collaboratives that are operating in 8 states. Some of the collaboratives are a regional collaborative in California, for instance, the Los Angeles County Collaborative. Some of them are statewide, such as in Texas we have a statewide collaborative that is separate from the Greater Houston Collaborative. And then there are states such as Illinois or North Carolina that are covering the whole state. In Tennessee, we have folks in certain regions of Tennessee. So you are part of a larger body of work that is really making great strides with building our capacity to provide services around DACA and to really integrate our immigrant community as much as possible into the benefits of being part of the American society. So we'll move on to the next slide to talk about the reporting. We're going to get into the details of what you will be reporting in a second, but wanted to share with you that really the purpose of this reporting is to measure the impact of DACA funding at the local level and then nationally. And we will be tracking, obviously, the clients that are served, but also the capacity that has been built in your organization or in your community around this issue, partnerships that have been created, and very importantly, advocacy efforts around immigrant integration and around DACA and other immigration issues. We want to include in the reporting all of your DACA work, regardless of the funding source. So, for instance, you may be receiving a certain amount of money from your funders locally through this collaborative, and it may not represent all of the funds that you're receiving to do DACA work. We want to hear in your report about all of your DACA work, not just a subsection that may be directly impacted by this funding. And so what we'll be asking you to do is have local grantees will be completing an online form, and we'll talk about the details in particular for our Texas folks in a second. So you'll complete an online form, and that form will then be reviewed by your local collaborative coordinator. So you won't be reporting directly to GSER, but as part of your normal reporting to your collaborative about your work. And then those coordinators will report up to GSER. All right, on the next slide, let's talk about the timing for these reports. So the report will be, again, for all of your DACA work in the current grant period. As you might imagine, with 10 different collaboratives operating across the country, and that represents, a few hundred grantees, we're not all on the same grant cycle, the same timeline. And so the grant period that we'll be asking you to report on is based on the national match timeline. We have some investment from national funders for this work, and so we're using their grant, their investment, as the timeline that we'll be following rather than the individual grant cycles that you may have locally. So you'll be reporting on the period from October 1st, 2014 to September 30th, 2015. And immediately you may say, well, my grant didn't start till December or January. What do I do for reporting on all of our good work after that September 30th cutoff? As needed, you'll be doing an interim report for your work through September, and then you'll be submitting a supplemental report when your grant actually ends to report on that additional activity. So grantee interim reports will be due by September 7th. There will be possibly a few small modifications to that, but that's our target date is September 7th to receive your interim report. Okay, on the next slide, let's talk about some of the details of the reporting form itself. And what I would love for you all to do is you will have received in your invitation for this webinar the attachment of an Excel document, and that Excel document is called the DOTD reporting form, the grantee template, and wanted to go through that with you. And thank you, Caleb, who is showing that to us here online. So we can look at the three sections that you all will be reporting on. The first tab, and you can follow along on the screen or on your own screen with looking at the Excel document. The first tab will give you kind of the overview instructions of what this reporting template will be. And so there we talk about what the Delivering on the Dream, or DOTD, is, the National Initiative of Grant Makers Concerned with Immigrants and Refugees, and how you all are a part of that. And then we get to the instructions about the timing that you're going to be using, as you see at the top, it says the grant period October 2014 to September 30th, 2015, and what parts you'll be completing by the September 7th date, completing parts 1, 2, and 3, part 1 being the basic information we'll get to in just a second, part 2, the actual deliverables, what actually happened, and part 3, the short answer. And again, you'll be submitting this online in a variety of different ways we'll talk about in just a second. So part 1, if we can go to that tab, the basic information, things that will be very straightforward for you to complete. Your location, your city and state, the name of your organization, the email address, and the name and title of the person who's completing this form, your phone number as well. And then the period covered by this report. So if your grant started in January of 2015, January 1st of 2015, you would be putting in there January 1 to the September 30th, 2015 ending timeline for this report. So start with whatever your grant time frame is and then use the September date as your ending. And then the amount of your grant from this particular funding source, from your particular collaborative. So whether you're in Texas or Los Angeles or Tennessee, the money that you received from that particular funder collaborative. And then lastly, on line 10, the location served by your grant. We'd like to know, are you serving the city of Nashville, or are you serving all of LA County, or are you serving the state of Illinois? Put that there. And you're always welcome to add notes if there are any pieces that are unclear, add additional notes to that. So that first tab is pretty straightforward. Here in the second tab, we're going to talk about the actual deliverables, things that you actually accomplished. And there's 2 sections to this. This top section is in red. This is the required section. And Caleb, if you wouldn't mind scrolling down just for a second, and we'll see that the bottom section is in blue. These are the optional fields. So just want to make sure that it's clear for you all. We have a distinction between the required section that you'll be completing and the optional section. So we'll go line by line with some of these, because we want to make sure that everyone is clear on what we mean by these categories. So the first required section is on work you'll be doing in education, outreach, and legal services. And in line 4, we begin with the participants at all outreach events. So the word outreach can mean lots of different things to different people across the country. We learned that as we put this form together. So in the notes section, you'll see that we have highlighted exactly what it means to us and what we'd like you to provide based on your activities. So outreach here is any program where you're sharing information or education about DACA. It can include workshops, community meetings, other types of gatherings, an event at a business. So it might have been specifically focused on DACA. It might have been focused on all immigration services, but you had a portion of it that you dedicated to DACA. We want to use any of those events and talk about the number of participants that you had there. In line 5, this is the opportunity to talk about eligibility screenings and intakes. And again, the word intake can mean lots of different things. If you're in social work and you're in healthcare and legal services, or a direct community service provider, community center, intakes can mean lots of different things. So we wanted to clarify that intakes for us are things that are delivered at workshops or clinics or offices, but the components of that intake or the eligibility screening includes a step-by-step review of the applicant's eligibility documents to ensure that they qualify for DACA. And these are most often conducted by BIA-accredited reps or legal staff or volunteers who have that capacity to do that. So that would be the eligibility screening and intake portion, and we'd like to know how many of those you did. And then in questions or line 6 and 7, pretty straightforward, how many initial applications were completed and how many renewal applications were completed. And in line 8, how many individuals were screened as potentially eligible for permanent relief. Perhaps some of you already screen every single one of your folks when you do screenings for them to make sure that they're eligible for anything else. So we want to know how many folks you did screen for permanent release eligibility. Then in the next section, Section B, we want to then move from the direct client service to the capacity that was hopefully built for your organization or your community. So line 11 is the number of legal volunteers that you engage. And these could be pro bono attorneys or law students or BIA accredited reps who volunteered. That's line 11. In line 12, I know some of you are using funding to expand the number of BIA accredited reps that you have in your organization or your community. So here we'd like to know about how many newly accredited BIA folks you have. And then line 13, the number of non-legal volunteers that you train. So you may have had, as I know some of our North Carolina grantees had, DACA recipients who then came back and were volunteers through events or outreach events to get the word out, or they actually led some of the workshops to educate communities about what DACA is. So there is an opportunity to capture all those non-legal volunteers that you're engaging. Then in line 15, we get to section C of the required. This is the last section of the required part. This is the characteristics of the population served. And what we would like you to indicate here is the actual number of people who are in those age categories. Now, obviously, when we're talking only about DACA, we will have a majority of them will be under 34. And we'd like the breakdown of that. We're hoping that as soon as DAPA is initiated and we can move forward with doing that work, that we'll be able to also capture those folks who are older than DACA eligibility who will be participating in the process. I see Caitlin has her hand raised. Caitlin, would you I don't know, Caleb, if there's a way to unmute Caitlin, or Caitlin, if you could type your question in the chat box, and I'd be happy to answer it. Okay, and while Caitlin's typing, let's move down to the optional fields, and then we can come back to whatever the question was that she may have had. So the optional fields, these are by their name, optional. These are not required, but part of the reason that we made so many of these optional is we understand some of them may be challenging to quantify, especially, oh good, I'll get to Caitlin's question in just a second. Some of these categories may be hard for you to know. If you have a room full of people at an outreach event, you know there were 300 people, but do you know how many of them were female or how many of them were from Latin America? So you'll see that we will have captured some of this, tried to capture some of this in a qualitative way in the short answers. But here, if you are capturing any of this information, we would appreciate you sharing it. So the first line is the number of cases handled through case management on line 27. And case management in this regard, again, there are lots of different terms, but for us, it's the process of following potential applicants to the end of their application process. And this recognizes that some of our local community service centers may not have any legal staff at their center. A person arrives to their door and wants to know about DACA, and that community center helps them with getting transcripts from their school and getting things notarized or translated, and helping them put together their packet, and then they get referred to an attorney. So this is an opportunity to capture that kind of information. In B, the field capacity, this is again another opportunity for us to find out what other legal staff you may have hired. Perhaps you expanded by having new attorneys or some paralegals. And then some of the grantees in the cohort are larger organizations that provide technical assistance to small community-based organizations. And so if you are doing that kind of work, we'd like you to note that. And please note that it is based on the number of organizations that you serve, not the number of times that you serve them. So if you had 10 calls with one organization, please only list it as 1 and not 10. Then the rest of the characteristics of population served are pretty self-explanatory: gender, the country of origin or the region of origin, and then the location, whether they are rural or suburban or urban, in lines 46 and beyond. Caleb, would you mind scrolling down just to make sure we captured all of those? Thank you. And then the years in the U.S., educational attainment, and their language or English proficiency. Again, some of these may be things that you capture, some of them may not. Some of them may be easy to tell if your work is predominantly in a rural area and all of the folks who come to you are from rural communities, then it's easy to say what number of folks are rural. But if you aren't tracking any of these, just remember these are optional questions. Caleb, if you will scroll back up to the required section, I want to address Caitlin's good questions. She's wondering at what point providers should inquire about the client's age. And I think through the application process, Caitlin, there would be opportunities. I'm sure it's different for every provider, but I'm sure that there would be opportunities to ask that question in the screening process, not at the outreach event necessarily. So back to the characteristics of the population served. Okay, maybe we need to clarify what that question is. Caitlin, I'll move to your second question, and perhaps if you can also type in your phone number into the chat window, we might be able to unmute you specifically to clarify that first question you had. Your other question was the date of initial meeting, the date of their application. If their application is absent, the date of approval. I guess I'd like clarification from you, Caitlin, what you mean. I don't think we're capturing the dates of their applications. Oh, okay. And Caleb, can you see Caitlin's phone number there? So Caitlin was asking about, since folks will be aging throughout the process of the service, it might take 6 months or 8 months to get them through the process. At what point should we classify their age? I think that's really up to you. Hopefully they won't be aging 5 years in the process, but if they're under 18 and then go into 18 and over, I think that won't be a big deal. Whenever it seems most convenient to you would be my guess. And then I want to make sure, was that the full question about age, Caitlin? Good. Caitlin, you're unmuted now. Okay, so that was the full question of age, whether it's at the beginning of the approval process or exactly. Does that answer it, Caitlin?
Yes, thank you very much.
Yes. Okay, you're welcome. Thanks. Thanks for that question. That was a new question. I appreciate always being asked things we haven't heard before. Okay, so then, so this was the actual deliverables tab about the work that you've done, and this is the numerical quantitative section. So we'll move to part 3, which is the short answer section, and these are all required. That's why they're all in red. And this gives us both the opportunity to ask some different questions than in the quantitative, but also to ask some questions about the quantitative side that you may not have been able to capture in the optional, and hopefully you can tell the story of that in a different way here in the short answer question. So question 1 is, please share 2 to 3 lessons or promising practices that emerged during your time. And if you could comment on the role technology might have played, or innovation or communication. Outreach strategies, was Facebook an effective tool to get people to your event? Any of those pieces would be helpful for you to share with us. And it's not only helpful for your local coordinator to know, but as local coordinators are reading all of your reports, they share that with other funders across the country about what's working in New York that might be applicable in LA. And so we appreciate you sharing that. And as well, if there are any challenges or gaps that you experience, that helps us also to know where does funding need to be distributed. Is there a particular way that we can really target our support to make a big difference? So question one is that opportunity to give us a few lessons learned that you had. Question number 2 on line 10 is an opportunity for us to capture in a story format, in a qualitative answer, what we couldn't capture in the quantitative optional section if you weren't able to say that. So here, if you say, well, we think probably 60 to 70% of the people we served were from Latin America, and the majority of them were under 25, this would be the place where you can make those comments if you weren't able to give us specific numbers in the optional section. Line 13, number 3, if you found, if you've had folks who had some sort of permanent remedy, what were the most common types of that? So again, if you can give us some estimates for the top 3, these aren't necessarily hard numbers, but of the maybe 10 or 15% of folks that you screened, they were eligible for some sort of permanent remedy, and the majority of those were for family-based petitions, something to help us learn what's happening with permanent remedies. Line 16, we want to understand, again, moving from the client side to your organization side, what has changed for you during this grant year? Where has your capacity grown? Where perhaps has it diminished that you hadn't anticipated? If all of a sudden you had legislative action that happened in your state that affected people's incentive to get DACA, perhaps that also changed the number of people who were knocking on your door. So we'd like to know if there were any new services that you added as a result of this initiative, any new functions, and here also share a couple stories of clients that were served. We certainly always want to know kind of the hard numbers, hard facts, but the stories are probably what keep all of us doing this work, the personal stories of triumph for people who are able to access services through DACA that they weren't able to before. In line 19, how have you engaged immigrants, including Dreamers, in your work? Again, like the example earlier, you may have been, you may be using DACA recipients for outreach in some way, or you may have actually hired some of them now that you could. So please let us know about that. And here, if you can, give us a couple of profiles of folks, again, some stories, and some qualitative and quantitative information. So if you had 20 volunteers and 10 of them were immigrants and 5 of them were Dreamers, then please give us that kind of information. Line 22, question number 6. We want to find out about other partners. We certainly know about immigrant serving providers who are partnering with one another, but who else have you engaged that isn't the usual suspect? Perhaps a school has decided to let you come in and do a DACA education session. A library provided pro bono space for you to do DACA application workshops. So let us know how you were able to engage some of those non-traditional partners. And then question 7 on line 25 is tell us about capacity now beyond your organization to your local or statewide infrastructure. What has changed, what has been strengthened because of your efforts? And this is both on a service level, but also on policy level, legislative level. So let us know how your context has changed because of your work. And line 28 is if you have any additional thoughts or feedback for us, feel free to put something in there as well. Okay, so if we can go back to the PowerPoint now, And so we've covered the basic information and the deliverables and the short survey questions, the short answers. So we'd like to talk about the online form here. You'll be submitting actuals in September, so your actual deliverables through work that you've done in September. And then if your grant goes beyond, you're going to submit the online form. Again, just like we had in the Excel document, it'll be color-coded where the red part is the required section and then the non-red part is the optional. And when you submit this form, you're going to receive a PDF of it as well at the end, so you'll have your proof of submission. Okay, so then let us, we just want you to see that it looks very much like the Excel document. You will be reporting online. The majority of you will be reporting online through this form. For folks in our Texas collaborative, you'll actually be reporting. You'll answer these questions, but it'll be through the same reporting form that you have used before to report to your Texas collaborative. So these will be the questions. They'll just be in a different format for you all. So you'll see here is the overview and the instructions as well. Part 1, your basic information that we went over, kind of the demographics for you as an organization. And then you get to the bottom of this and you click Next. And it'll take you to the deliverables, and you'll see that the subheadings, like A for education, outreach, and legal services, or B for field capacity, are highlighted in red, so it lets you know which are the sections that are required. And then if we scroll down, you'll see that the others that are not in red but are in blue instead are your optional, just like in the Excel document. And all of these questions mirror what we just covered in the Excel document. And then when you get to the bottom of this page, you will again hit Next. And then you'll get to the short answer section, and that will be highlighted in red moving forward so that you'll know that these are also required questions to answer. But these are all the same questions that we just saw in the Excel document. And when you're done with this short answer section, then you're going to hit Submit, and that will immediately send a copy of this to your coordinator, and you'll be able to print a PDF of your report as well. Okay, so now you've seen what it looks like online. You will have the Excel document as a reference as you're working through your answers, but you will be submitting everything online so that we can measure the impact of your work. So on the next slide, I just want to address a few of the frequently asked questions that we have heard. What if we haven't yet collected this data? So maybe your grant started in January of this year, and now you're seeing this reporting form for the first time and saying, well, I haven't been gathering this information from January to May. What do I do now? And so that's our opportunity for you to describe as best you can in that short answer section about the characteristics of the population you served or the kind of work that you've done if you don't have straight numbers for all of it. But we would like you to, in the required sections of the actual deliverables, to be tracking everything from now through September moving forward of the work that you've done. So if you haven't collected it up till now, not a problem. Let's hear some estimates in the short answer section. But do start collecting from now moving forward. Want to reemphasize that we'd like you to count all of your DACA work, not just the work supported through this particular grant funding. I know it's really tough when you do an outreach event and 20% of it is covered through one grant and 40% of it is covered through other grants. It's hard to say, oh, this grant actually covered this particular event. And so we just want to hear about all your DACA work as a whole. The third bullet is just to make sure we're clear about the difference between the required and the optional sections. Again, the required being highlighted in red and the optional in blue. And the required are things that we really, 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 really want to know. We'd like to know all of it, but we understand that some of the optional ones may be harder to capture. And so that's why in the fourth bullet, you'll see that there was some similarity between some of the quantitative and qualitative sections, the questions in those sections, just because we know some will be hard to capture numerically, and so we want you to tell us a story about it in the short answer section. And then we will unmute the phone lines now and just see if there's any other information that would be
unmuted.
That would be helpful for you all to know in preparing these reports, and just open up the space for you all to ask any questions if there was anything that was unclear about this reporting. And again, you can ask the questions either now out loud, or you're still welcome to use the chat window if you prefer to do that. Any questions from our grantee organization? Okay. I'm hearing silence. And just want to clarify, any questions from our funder in Los Angeles about this process? No questions there either. Would like to reiterate for our Texas folks that you will again be using your own form, and the folks in Texas will go over that one with you, but these will be some of the questions you'll be answering on that form as well. Okay, well, let us move then to our next steps, and Camelia, if you can give us a wrap-up of this webinar.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thanks, Althea. And I also just wanted to acknowledge Althea as our fearless leader who is heading up our data harmonization committee. So the group of folks who are really discussing these various metrics and just forging forward with this developing this form. So thank you for that, Althea, and thank you for leading today's discussion. And so for next steps, everyone, I just wanted to let you know that we will be sending you a recording of today's webinar, so you can go back and reference it if you'd like. For those of you who will be using our online grantee reporting form, you'll be receiving a link from your coordinator, so just be on the lookout for that, for the link to the online grantee reporting form. And I think the final thing is just feel free to contact us with any questions. I'm here at GSER, and I think you should have my contact information. So again, just feel free to reach out. Happy to answer any questions. And that should be about it. You have the Excel spreadsheet, which is just the template, but feel free to take a peek at that and reference it if you'd like. And just remember, we'll be using the online forms for the final reporting process.
And Camelia, if they do have any questions about their grant in particular, they should still contact their coordinator and not GSER, correct?
That's exactly right, yes. That's right. Yeah, please feel free for your own local process. Definitely do contact your coordinator, not us. But if you have any larger questions about today's webinar, the broader information that was presented, we're happy to be a resource for you. And let me just pause and see if anyone has any final questions. You can share in the chat box. You can share over the phone. Anything else? Okay, I think we're good to go then. Thanks for joining us today, everyone. We appreciate you participating. Have a great week.
Thank you.